And you're on mute.
We are recording. I was waiting for that. Thank you. And so in terms of, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. This is our Emerging Technology Community of Interest monthly meeting. And what we hope with all these monthly meetings for our community of interest is that our material is engaging, that we all learn something from it, and that it challenges you to think about something in a different perspective than you haven't thought before. So with that, let's jump over to the agenda for today. In terms of updates for the COI, Jackie, is there anything that we need to cover?
Yes, I think for the COI, just a general overview and then overview of the leadership team.
Oh, okay, thank you. In the Emerging Technology COI, we have always been on the edge, so to speak, with a lot of interesting partners. We play in the blockchain space, in the cognitive computing, AI, machine learning space, analytics, big data, right? Interactive technologies, Internet of Things, and DevOps. So we play in a lot of different spaces, with the idea being that we are experimenting, we're trying to find best practices and then transition them in partnership with other COIs to help government serve the American people better. So next slide. And this is, I think, for me, the most important slide in the presentation. I mean, obviously, the speakers and everybody else would disagree, but for me, I think this is one of the most important slides, because this is really what, makes our COI what it is, right? All these people that, spend their time as volunteers helping out and making this a fun place to be, where everybody likes to come. And I would be remiss if I didn't point to our new program chair. Cindy, if you want to wave to the audience, that would be great. Cindy has taken on additional responsibility for COI, and I'm glad that, between Todd and I, we were able to cajole her into doing that. So thank you, Cindy, and also we have others on the team. We have, Sandy, as always, who's now, can I announce it, Sandy?
Yes. Thank you, Neil.
Okay, so Sandy, who has been a great partner in our COI, who is now going to be the industry chair for the acquisition COI. So, really glad that, Sandy's going to be taking on that role. Thank you for always being a great supporter of everything in ACT-IAC COI, and hopefully we can still keep you here to do things, so you don't run away and just abandon us with your new family. So just keep that in mind, Sandy, because I will hunt you down. Also others, Nevin and, Josh and Fred and David, Latrice, Dawn, Mike, Danielle, everybody on this slide. This is exactly all the volunteers who help us make the Emerging Technology COI what it is. And what we're hoping is, as we do these presentations, more of you would like to join us and be part of our larger volunteer family. Next slide, please. So with that, I will turn this over to Cindy to talk about this slide. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Over the last 2 years, the Emerging Tech COI has partnered with the Acquisition COI to kind of look at how we can develop and implement initiatives, essentially leveraging new technologies and practices to make the federal acquisitions better. Most recently, the group conducted an ideation workshop, which is what you're seeing there, where we invited key leaders in the acquisition community to understand and really identify the real life challenges and most pressing problems they face. Our first approach, which you're seeing here, is tackling the low-hanging fruit, where we do plan on hosting a Shark Tank in mid-August and welcome both industry and government to help solve for problems identified around processes and policy, requirements and inputs and automation. And then secondly, we'll also be continuing discussions with the acquisition community around those really hard problems to truly see how we can look at understanding and tackling them. So if you have any questions or would like to be involved in this partnership, please feel free to contact myself in the email below.
Thank you, Cindy. And with that, we move to the next slide, which keeps me in good graces with the rest of the team. I think the ACT-IAC updates about the Cyber Summit. Jackie, is that coming up?
Yep. Jackie, you want me to take this? This is Doug from the Cybersecurity COI.
Take it away, Doug.
Okay, thanks. Hi, everyone. Doug Cowan. I am the liaison from the Cybersecurity COI to the Emerging Technologies team. Similar focus in terms of our mission around wading through some of the advanced technologies occurring in the space and understanding how to best operationalize the technologies that are available in light of the policies and procedures that are in place. We are well represented across multiple civilian, intel, and DoD agencies over in our space. And we work very, very closely with them to, one, bring the viewpoints of industry to government, to share the challenges that government is facing, and then third, to take on a couple of key initiatives that we are going through. Those include things like multiple white papers on zero trust, understanding how best to use automation not only to secure and defend data, but also to ease the process of authorizations. We had a similar ideation project in conjunction with GSA focused on how to better the FedRAMP process. And we're going to kick that off again this upcoming year for not just FedRAMP, but for compliance in general, and what are the steps that are required to ease the burden for industry and government to meet certification and authorization. And then lastly, we've got a working group focused on data dominance. How do we make sense of all the data that we're able to generate with sensors, pieces like that, to better secure and defend the environment, as well as make decisions for people and process. So we're pleased to be able to partner with Emerging Technologies on efforts like this, and I look forward to doing so again. Thank you. Couple of upcoming pieces here. Cyber Challenge in October. October is, you may or may not know, is Cybersecurity Month, so we do a heavy focus there. We typically do showcases at the Tech Hub at Imagination each year. So those are interactive sessions, largely focused on things like human-centered design, around what are some of the key initiatives and projects that are going on right now. Most recently, we did something similar to that, focus on outcomes of the most recent cybersecurity executive order. And then lastly, we've got the Customer Experience Summit in November. We'll be partnering on the President's management agenda and the impact of security in that space. So.
Hi, good morning. This is Nancy Delanoche from ACT-IAC. So I just wanted to add that we are in the process of planning for these upcoming events. And if you're interested in volunteering and being part of the program planning team, drop me a note and we can add you to the team. I will put my email on the chat so you can contact me. Thank you. Back to you, Neil or Jackie.
No, I was going to say there's some coupons available for some of these events that expire soon. So make sure you jump on early and register fast, sooner rather than later. Thanks.
Thank you so much. So with that, we will now move into our really esteemed group of speakers today. We're very excited to present People as the Strongest Link, Emerging Trends in Human-Centered Design and Customer Experience Approaches for Cybersecurity. We just appreciate everyone being here today. It should be a really robust discussion. One thing to note as we move into these presentations, we will have several periods for Q&A. And so our hope is that this will be very interactive. We want to engage with everyone here today. And so once each presenter has completed their presentation, we will have Q&A right after to talk through everything that was discussed. And so with that, Arfa, I will pass the mic to you.
Good morning. I'm really thrilled to kick off discussion today with our first speaker. Michael Palmer is the Chief Experience Officer and Associate Chief Information Officer at the Bureau of Industry and Security within the U.S. Department of Commerce. Previously, Michael led technology modernization initiatives for USDS, the United States Digital Service at the White House, and at DHS as USDS tackled digital transformation projects across government. Michael has designed and managed over $5 billion in government technology programs at a variety of agencies and has received awards for his innovation and leadership. Recently, he led modernization activities in mission areas such as export control, immigration services, space exploration, and emergency management. He's an active member of the ACT-IAC community, a fellow, and has served as the government chair of the ACT-IAC acquisition COI, as well as the government vice chair for the 2019 and 2022 ACT-IAC Voyagers leadership programs, which includes my class. I'm so honored that he is here today and brought in members of his team. So with that, over to you, Mr. Palmer. You're on mute. Yep, there we go.
You knew it wasn't going to go silky smooth. Anyway, thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here. A couple of quick plugs. One, volunteer for the COIs and for the planning committees for these upcoming events. It's what led to my job here, getting to know people through my volunteering through planning those events. It's what led to my job with the digital service at the White House. So for those of you from a career perspective, volunteer for those events so people can see how amazing you are no matter where you are in the government or in industry. So one quick plug. And then secondly, I was the Committee of Interest chair for the Acquisition Committee of Interest for a while. And so Sandy, good luck. That was 5 or 6 years ago. Acquisitions come a little bit further in the last 5 or 6 years, but I'm very excited to see where you're going to take that community of interest. Again, I've been told that my background's a little interesting when it comes to being the Chief Experience Officer here at the Bureau of Industry and Security here at the Department of Commerce. And I'm going to introduce my two colleagues here in a second. Just in a nutshell, to tell you a little bit about what we do, anytime a company wants to export a technology, they need to get a license. Anytime they want to export computer chips, an Xbox, a refrigerator, guns, ammo, and that's half of what we do, is that licensing process. The other half of what we do is we have special agents that partner with other enforcement agencies to track down and investigate cases of people trying to get around that licensing process. And so that really gets us into some interesting cases that involve other countries, as well as drug cartels and oligarchs and all kinds of stuff you read in the news usually. So we have a very important mission in terms of protecting the interests of America's intellectual property and interests. And a big part of that is the cybersecurity. So we are, because of that, a target in terms of cybersecurity threats. A lot of what you've read over the last 3 to 6 months, we've been involved in. So, and just back to my background is in acquisition, it's in the program management of large IT programs, and also in cybersecurity and working at CISA at DHS for a while. So, and the common thread that's led me to the job that I'm in right now is empathy for the user communities that each one of those program office support functions serve. And so always having some kind of understanding of the people that you're serving from a customer perspective. And that is the concept for our conversation today, is that we at BIS, we not only have customers, but we serve customers from a cybersecurity perspective. I want this to be highly interactive, so please put questions into the chat. Feel free to raise your hand. And from there, I'm gonna introduce Ida Mix. Ida, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll pass it over to Rob.
Thanks, Mike. My name is Ida Mix, and I'm the Chief Information Security Officer at the Bureau of Industry and Security. And I lead the cybersecurity program at BIS. We not only consume the services, we also provide the services. And prior to joining the Bureau of Industry and Security, I worked in private industry, and I worked in private industry as a telecommunications programmer and also over content management.
Rob, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, thanks, Mike. Thanks, Ida. My name is Rob Richardson. I'm Director of Security Operations. Most of my career has been here at BIS, actually. I've pretty much done every role here within the IT shop. Currently, Director of Security Operations and run the security monitoring. And basically, we're a small shop, so a lot of us do a lot of different things. So we're tied in with assessments. We kind of help each other out on the paper side, is what I call it, the compliance side, and then I'm more of the technical side. But yes, my background is mostly in IT and last 15 years in security.
And just really quick, Ida, starting with you, tell us a little bit about how, we are a customer, a cybersecurity customer from the bigger cybersecurity ecosystem outside of BIS. We are consuming the policies and whatnot, and trying to implement them. Tell us a little bit about what's that like, being a customer in the federal cybersecurity space.
That's an interesting question, Mike. One of the roles that we occupy, because we are a bureau under the Department of Commerce hold, we have to ingest their security policies, and we have to tailor our policies for the bureau around what DOC has set up as the parameters for the agency. And a lot of the bureaus within DOC has very different missions. And as you stated before, our missions is exporter control. And we also work with a lot of the three-letter agencies. So we do a lot of intelligence and national security. And so sometimes, it's a challenge trying to make sure you're being compliant with what DOC is requesting, but you have to also work with and execute the mission from a national security level. So that's one of the ways in which we're working with our customers, and which is the users, trying to make them understand things from DOC compliance. And there's a challenge that we can't do certain things certain ways, and just trying to work that out. Also, from the compliance end, our major customers, shall we say, are the OIG and the oversight committees, which is separate, which is different from what IT sees. IT sees the users, and the application side would see the business users. And so it's just a different view of things, and trying to meld all of these different viewpoints together to get them to work.
And Rob, you've been in this, in the cyber game for a while. How have things, customer experience wasn't really a concept in the cyber world, say 5-10 years ago. Tell us a little bit about how things have evolved over time, what you've seen lately in terms of things potentially changing a little bit, even with working with your own customers.
Absolutely. Yeah, it has changed. We were actually joking in an earlier meeting today about the only answer you'd ever get from IT security was no on any question asked. And we have evolved from that. Personally, working with Ida and stuff, we made it a point that we wanted to kind of create a one-stop shop, a BIS IT security, one place you can go, anything you want to know about security, whether it's technical or compliance related or anything. We've helped people out at home with their laptop, with their routers and their Wi-Fi and stuff. If we have the time, we'll help out anybody. But the key point of that is, in my opinion, is that the users are the tripwire to security. Usually, I've had many instances in the past and incidents where the user was the first one to catch it. So with that being said, we want to make a good relationship with our users. We want to know that they email us, we respond with, we're not some bot back here just giving generic answers. We'll answer their problems promptly, and we'll work with them until they get it resolved. And that has been the transition over the last few years. And I think building that up, phishing is a perfect example. I mean, phishing is one of your biggest attack vectors now, and that's users. And you need to communicate with these users and get them comfortable with what they can and can't open them. And not to the point where you're terrifying them, they're coming to you about every email and stuff, but at least get them situationally aware. And that's something else we focus on. We do quarterly exercises on that stuff. But the users and their customer experience with security, it shouldn't be a situation where we're always saying no to them. It should be a situation where we're helping them become more secure and feel more comfortable to do their jobs on these systems. As you stated before, we're big in the news with Russia and all that stuff. We are a target, and a lot of these users obviously know that. And we hope to working with them and building these relationships with these users, with our customers, that we can basically make a stronger security posture for BIS overall.
So Ida, while we're waiting, can you tell us a little bit more about how you guys sort of take these HCDCX concepts and bake them into some of the cyber practices?
I can tell you one thing that we've done from that standpoint. We consume assessment services. So we reach out to federal agencies and we bring them in to do our security assessments. One of the things we did, we looked at how we would report on the assessments. And so we organized things from our end to make it a lot easier for us to go in and search every year, every control, and how, just everything at a fingertip. And when we got ready to provide the information to the assessor, well, they had things organized a little different. And they had what they call entity IDs, and they wanted certain things loaded into certain IDs. And truthfully, we were late on getting our stuff organized. And when we looked at that, we're like, okay, if we go back and try and retrofit all of this in here, we'll never get this uploaded. So what we did was we said, okay, everything's organized in a very logical and organized way. It corresponds to the NIST security controls. We had everything organized by family and by controls. So we said, it's too late to get what they want. Let's just ship it up to them how we have it organized. And so once the assessors started to use the way we had organized things, from their experience, they were able to go through and look at a control, look at how we implement it, and actually go to an artifact. So it made their job much easier. And so they came back and told us, we never thought of doing it this way, and you guys are the first persons to do it. And it was a very easy experience from both sides, from their side and our side. It made the assessment go much smoother. So
Awesome.
As a customer, we were able to change their customer experience and how they now would go back and interact with their customers.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I just want to remind everyone here to feel free to post questions in the chat. We are monitoring those, and I'm happy to pitch those to our speakers. My next question is for you, Mike. Your role is a very unique one. It's not one that we see this marriage of CX within OCIO. So can you tell us a little bit about what are the initiatives that are most important to you in this newly created role?
Yeah, it's funny. Arriving here, 7-8 months ago, the technical debt that had been just generated over the last 2 or 3 years with just lack of delivery, it was a problem. It had piled up. Our systems are 10 to 15 years old, and that might be generous.
Yes.
and our infrastructure is archaic as well. And so we began first looking at modernizing our infrastructure. So we're on a journey to modernize our infrastructure, which is starting with moving our entire infrastructure to the cloud, and doing that in a relatively short amount of time, about 6 months. So that was the start, so that we could have a platform to do some of the modern capability development efforts that we really wanted that would actually impact our customers out in the field. And whether they're external customers or agents trying to do things on enforcement actions. Another thing that we're focused on is freeing up our siloed data sources, and then being able to share those with our agency partners, as well as just internally allowing folks to do reporting that they haven't been able to do before. I mean, you give people a simple dashboard on a siloed data set that they haven't had access to themselves for the longest time, and it just blows their mind. And so we're trying to do some really interesting things there. Rob, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Oh no, I just, the dashboards were amazing. It was a simple amount, it was a simple set of data, but when it's visualized stuff, these enforcement agents went nuts on it. Yes, I would just second that.
And so real simple stuff at the beginning. And this summer we're doing a round of user research, starting with our export enforcement conference, which is next week. It's big for the export community. That's at the Grand Marquis Marriott downtown, and it's on our BIS's website, which is not the best website, and we're modernizing that. So we're starting to look at modernizing the digital experiences for our communities. And the start of that is better understanding their needs when they come and engage with BIS. You know, what are their needs? What are they trying to accomplish? Because I think we need to get better at that.
Awesome, thank you. We've got two sort of questions for the overall panel here, so feel free to jump in, panelists. The first one, I think, builds on what Ida commented on with regard to compliance as a unique motivator to get things done. So since, you know, when you compare that to typical commercial UX and CX practices, they're built on a body of research and they've had refinement over a few decades. What would you love to have more research on to develop best practices around compliance?
Oh, that's a tricky question because it's funny. As you, let's say, have the users imagine more and more what they can do, you still have this anchor called Fisma and NIST security controls. And there's some of the, how shall I say, it becomes monotonous and it becomes routine. And the question that we deal with is how do we make that more interactive? And so some of the things that we've been able to launch is our continuous monitoring program to try and get better at collecting the routine stats. One of the things we also are looking at is to looking at our security services, just taking a different mindset and trying to say, okay, what is routine? What can we say as commodity? And so from a commodity standpoint, well, you know, anybody can do it. We want to thin that out and let someone take care of that. And then I want to empower my staff to be more strategic and to look at things from a different perspective. But in order for me to do that, I have to get rid of, you know, the weight that comes with compliance. And so what we try to do is to interweave that into a lot of the actions that Mike is talking about, that Rob is talking about, and to figure out how we can breathe life into compliance. So it's not so much as a burden, even though it is.
Ida and Rob have been fantastic partners with doing what they need to do, but helping us accelerate the deployment of capabilities out there for customers to benefit from. And so that isn't always the case with the partnership between, a development shop, which falls under my lane primarily, as well as and a cybersecurity unit. So.
And one of the things we're looking at, Mike, I know when you said you're taking the summer to do the research and to help with the user experiences. One of the things we're looking at also is taking just the traditional SDLC and transforming it now that we're going to the new technologies and trying to secure the pipeline. So we'll put security and security testing in a lot earlier than when we normally interject it into the process.
I love what you said, Ida, about breathe life into compliance. I think that in itself is a huge challenge, but it's nice to hear that you guys are taking that on. We've got one more question in the chat. This is for you, Mike. In the CX effort, how are you assessing the user knowledge gaps that need to be addressed to improve communications so that people are smarter about cyber and understand what you and the team need to communicate and how to better deliver that knowledge?
How do we get smarter about our users with anything? I think talking with them and building up user personas that have multiple dimensions, including the sophistication of a specific persona and how would they react to potential threats. I think you have different levels of sophistication in different persona types, I think, potentially, and that's what I would expect the user personas that we're developing over the summer to reflect that level of detail. And Rob, I don't know if you have any thoughts around different types of customers with different knowledge levels about
Absolutely.
Responding to threats.
Yes, and we're also unique in the sense we have enforcement agents, and these guys are no joke. I mean, they'll come to you with an email. It was even a test email, phishing. They'll come back and tell you exactly where it came from and say, hey, look, this isn't real and stuff. So we have that level of people that really probably, technically, at least security-wise, are very, very smart, and and they use it in their own fields within export enforcement. But then we've got the users that basically need to be handheld for everything. So we kind of, again, I like the word user personas. We kind of build that up, I guess, unofficially. I know I do. I've got buckets of people. I know where they're coming from and what they are, and I usually adapt to that and kind of and answer their questions or work with them there. But ideally, you're trying to kind of get them to a common level set where you can bring the people that aren't as technically savvy up a little bit, and then kind of take the guys that are really technically savvy and kind of bring them back down a little bit and kind of meet in the middle.
Awesome. And I think we've got one more question here in the chat for you, Robert. Since you were speaking to the dashboards earlier, are you using dashboards for Fisma compliance to simplify the compliance reporting for your staff and customers?
Mostly for the staff. Most of our reporting is to our upper management. We do a lot of dashboards there. Now, not really online dashboards. We're more still old school in that sense, where we're doing PowerPoint presentations, but it's all visual. We show the security posture that way. We show the weaknesses that way. There's also a lot of that incorporated in with the annual assessments. And then we have a morning meeting with all of the OCIO staff, which is basically a dashboard of sorts. We go over vulnerabilities, we go over accounts, we go over, just kind of take a high level look at everything, any outages, any issues with VIPs. So that's kind of the way we're doing dashboards now. But, as Mike gets us beefed up technology wise on the app side, I'm sure I'll be coming as a customer asking for stuff like that. So I'm sure, with the move to like a more data lake and that kind of thing, I would love to put my telemetry data in there and kind of create more dashboards that could be shared wider than we are doing it now.
And
awesome.
To put my associate hat on, CIO hat on for a second, one of the bigger picture goals for us is to be more of a data-driven organization, and so I think that applies directly to our cybersecurity unit and how they are defining their success as an organization, and metrics are right at the heart of that, and painting the picture for upper leadership in terms of what how effective are we doing in protecting the interests of our the folks that try and meet our mission set here.
Awesome.
I like it. Oh, sorry.
Yep, go ahead, Ida. Please.
I was going to say, one of the interesting things about this, as we keep talking about the customers, is to understand who your customers are. And for us, security, you have a variety of customers. Some are the end users, some would the operations team, some are Mike, his applications team. We also have to deal with, the privacy group, acquisitions. So you have to understand your customers from a cybersecurity perspective, and to get them to understand cybersecurity, to interweave security into their practices. And what we found out is by taking the time and going through them with them, sitting down with them, telling them what we need, and better letting them see the overall picture. Now they can understand what it is we need, and things are getting a lot better, than it were in the past. Just getting the information from them.
Yeah, a lot of the success of this is simple stuff like communication and just a culture change from what's been happening in the past. And you've heard us talk about that today. Basic communication and empathy and listening, and just we're all trying to meet the mission, just from different angles.
So something that I wanted to drill down on with where security gets baked into that customer experience, interestingly enough, last week I was speaking with someone and they said that they refer to it as Sec DevOps now instead of DevSecOps. Where do you feel like it falls into that overall practice?
If you go to private sector, security is something that developers have on the tips of their minds as they're developing a thing. It's not a separate competency outside of your product development teams. It's something that is innate. It just happens that we as a federal community, it's evolved to where security has kind of been this own community outside of the cybersecurity. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, I was in development before I joined the federal government. And as a matter of fact, I worked in one of the billing departments. And so we dealt with customer payment information all the time. And security was just as important as any other requirement. In the private industry, we had two sets of requirements: functional requirements, usually that's what the customer tells us they want, and the non-functional. The non-functional is how you build your systems, the reliability, accessibility, and also security was part of that. So I was used to that. And when I came to the federal government and I realized that there was this monster called security, it took me a while to wrap my mind around that you had this whole organization called security, and it wasn't just included and understood as part of your daily deliverables. So now when I see DevSecOps, it's almost like a step back to the past. That's what we used to always, that's what I'm used to, and that's the way systems were always built.
Yeah, well, that puts us right at time, you all. I want to thank you so much for your time today. The emerging trends that you guys shared, where I think this whole community will be really interested to hear how this summer went for you guys with all the different things that you're working on. So we'd love to have you back and speak to that. Mike, I think your role as this emerging trend in GovCon is, something that we're definitely looking forward to. So anything that you can update this community on, we'd appreciate it. But thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, and I am blessed to work with amazing people. So that makes my job easy. So find amazing people.
We appreciate how you were so quick to bring in the team and show up all the awesome work that Ida and Robert have been working on. So thank you all for your time today. With that, I'll pass it back over to Jackie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Arpa. And thank you so much to the team for presenting. That was a really interesting conversation. And we are now going to move to a few examples of how human-centered design and customer experience and just general, very people-focused communications are being used in the cybersecurity space today. And so I'm very excited to intro someone who is working for a very dynamic organization. As you can see on the slide, like and follow NSA Cyber on Twitter. They are very active when it comes to communications, and Bailey is going to speak to it more. But with that, I would like to introduce Bailey Bickley. She is the NSA Cybersecurity Collaboration Center's Chief Strategy Officer, responsible for driving key initiatives to evolve the Cybersecurity Collaboration Center and deliver intel-driven cybersecurity. Prior to this role, Bailey served as the Chief of NSA Cybersecurity Communications and was pivotal to revitalizing the way the agency releases unique, timely, and actionable cybersecurity guidance for impacts that scale. Bailey has worked across the public and private sectors with tours at multiple intelligence community agencies, as well as one of the Big Four consulting firms. Bailey earned her undergraduate degree in communications and her master's degree in management. She is an eternal optimist who is passionate about uplifting other people, and in her spare time, you will find her hiking. And Bailey, I will pass the mic to you.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction. Thank you for all of the hard work that you have all put into pulling this together. It's really great to be with you all today. So I'm going to move at hopefully a fast clip. Please do drop questions in the chat as I go along, and I'm definitely looking forward to Q&A at the end. So for those that don't know me, again, my name is Bailey and I work at the National Security Agency, yes, that NSA. And so I thought I would start by giving a very high-level overview of the NSA for those that might not be very familiar with my employer. So NSA has two missions: signals intelligence and cybersecurity. Signals intelligence is our code breaking mission, and that's essentially how we collect signals intelligence or foreign intelligence from our adversaries, nation states overseas. We process those, decrypt them, analyze them, and produce insights for policymakers, the warfighter, etc. Conversely, we have our cybersecurity mission or our code making mission. And in that space, we're trying to keep our adversaries from doing to us what we are doing to them, right? So we produce the keys, codes, and cryptography that produce some of our nation's most sensitive systems, such as classified networks, weapons and space systems, nuclear command and control, etc. So that's the mission that I'm from today, is the cybersecurity side of the house. And as you heard in the introduction, I'm an eternal optimist. I'm a people person. So I absolutely love this topic of human-centered design. So excuse me if I get a little passionate during this lightning talk. So I want to start by asking a deeply philosophical question, which is, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody hears it, did it make a sound? And that's the question that we began to ask ourselves at the National Security Agency a few years ago. Because see, for decades, we've had this information assurance or cybersecurity mission, and we've developed and actually released cybersecurity guidance for the benefit of the broader community. But in more recent years, we realized that nobody really knew about our guidance. And it wasn't being actioned to the fullest extent that it could be. And so we began to dig into this, and I'll never forget sitting down with just our brilliant technologists and analysts, and they would dig into an emerging technology or nation state actors, tactics, techniques, and procedures, whatever it might be, a vulnerability, and they would just produce this, mouth-watering analysis. And I said, oh, how are you distributing this guidance? And the response was, well, we push it out through internal government to government channels, and then we publish it on nsa.gov. And there was this long, pregnant pause. And I had to finally say, you do know that nobody really visits nsa.gov, right? Like, it's a great resource to learn about our mission and what we do, but people aren't waking up in the morning and brewing their morning cup of coffee and sitting down to browse nsa.gov for their news, right? And so we had this internal reckoning that said, hey, we need to do a better job of reaching people, compelling them to read, but far more importantly, compelling them to act on our guidance. My background is in marketing. So essentially what we're trying to do is create first awareness with people and then move those people from awareness to action. Next slide, please. And so I think that in cybersecurity, sometimes we forget that it is truly all about people. Our network defenders are people, our adversaries are people, and they have unique pressure points. Policymakers, CISOs are people, and they have different backgrounds. They might not be as deeply technical. You know, the weakest link in your security architecture is likely also a person. And so we began to think about, you know, the humanity of it all. And if you work in the cybersecurity industry or the technology industry, between COVID and the cybersecurity incidents of the last 2 years, SolarWinds, ransomware, Log4j, you know, you have experienced a 1-2 punch. We're tired, we're busy, we're responding to things around the clock. We've been fighting people at Costco and Sam's Club to get toilet paper and Clorox wipes, right? Like, it's been insane. And so we are completely inundated with information, and that makes it extremely hard to parse through it, but also difficult to prioritize. You know, not only that, you take the incidents of the past 2 years and the trends, but then also the workforce is shifting beneath our feet, and we're beginning to digest our news differently. We have more millennials and Gen Z in the workforce than ever before, and this generation consumes their news via social media versus more traditional media like television, radio, newspapers, etc., right? And their attention span is also extremely short. And so we began to think about all these things, do research, and say, hey, as the workforce is evolving, so must we. And then the final thing I wanted to draw your attention to is this quote that I absolutely love. I put it up on the screen. People are irrational and make decisions that have nothing to do with facts. And yet we spend so much of our time improving our facts and very little concerned with everything else. And so we realized to be more effective, we had to stop for a second, take a step back and say, let's stop fixating on the facts and figures and the technical analysis and really focus on the user community and the network defenders themselves. Think about how they consume information, how they digest it, their habits, their psyche. And so with that in mind, we really began to overhaul the way that we release cybersecurity guidance. Next slide, please. And that started with joining Twitter. You all are in this community, so you know InfoSec Twitter is a whole thing. That is one of the top ways that the community digests information and collaborates and communicates about it. And so we joined Twitter via NSA Cyber, which is our threat feed for how we're pushing out information in real time, how we're alerting the user community, hey, we've just published guidance, we've just published mitigation guidance during ongoing exploitation campaigns, like take the Hafnium campaign, where we saw Chinese cyber actors conducting indiscriminate exploitation of Microsoft Exchange servers, right? So we began to push information out there using the platforms where the community lives and meeting people where they're at versus trying to drive them to a website such as nsa.gov. We also began more frequently attributing activity that we were seeing because we kind of recognize we run faster when we're being chased, and it makes a difference, right? When we can go from saying, you know, patch the CVE, you know, it's really bad, it could allow for remote code exploitation or whatever, to when we could say, patch this publicly known vulnerability because we know that Chinese state-sponsored actors are using it right now to gain access to sensitive systems, right? So we began to attribute that activity more broadly and more frequently. Another thing in thinking about how people digest information is how do you get their attention? Again, we're so inundated with information. So how do you get people to actually pay attention to what you want them to pay attention to? And so we began developing infographics, keeping two things in mind. The first one was what will catch people's attention as they're endlessly scrolling through Twitter. You know, you're just kind of scrolling through your newsfeed, right? And so we developed graphics and marketing materials and marketing collateral. I put an example up on the screen, things like 25 ways Chinese state-sponsored actors are exploiting your systems and how you can stop them. The second thing that we kept in mind when producing these marketing materials is how do we break down really technical concepts and make them more consumable and understandable for visual learners or for folks that might not be deeply technical, right? So I put up an example of an infographic we produced during the SolarWinds campaign about how Russian cyber actors were abusing and manipulating authentication mechanisms in cloud environments. And that one was hugely popular because we heard from network defenders, hey, I could take this in to my leadership or my CISO or whoever and help them understand what was really going on here. Media. I talked a little bit about how people consume news that they're probably not visiting nsa.gov on a regular basis. So we began working with media in advance of releasing critically important guidance so we could get with those trusted, respected technical outlets, national security outlets, so that we could use those bodies to really push this information out and get it into the most hands possible. I put the meme on there as a joke. You guys know that ransomware actors love to hit on holiday weekends. And so using things like humor to reach people, to connect with people. We're all incredibly stressed and we all enjoy laughing. That helps us take a breath in the middle of crazy times, break down walls. It helps us connect with other people. So you'll frequently see our director of NSA cybersecurity on Twitter sharing memes, having a laugh, just being real human beings and having those genuine connections. The final thing I wanted to mention on this slide is we also established feedback loops. So important, right? So we began to really listen and better understand what the community liked and didn't like when we released guidance. We would iterate and improve, collecting feedback, hearing from people, from industry partners. Hey, this was really helpful, but maybe you could clarify this. I still have questions about that. And we would re-release guidance that was continually improving. So we wanted to make sure that we established these comprehensive feedback loops that again incorporated feedback from the user community that's been mentioned so much today. Next slide, please. And so the end result of this is really increased awareness, increased action, right? Maybe it's implementing a patch, but maybe it's just hardening a software or whatever it may be, taking action against an adversary TTP. We're trying to move the needle from, again, awareness, action, and what that does is it frustrates our adversaries. We cannot make it easy on our adversaries to exploit our systems, to steal our intellectual property. And so we're finding that by considering the people first, by improving our communications and our marketing, we're really able to make a difference in that space and give our adversaries a bad day every day. So with that, I will shut up for a moment and I'm happy to take any questions from the audience.
Thank you, Bailey. That was really fantastic. And for asking questions, if you want to raise your hand, we can unmute you and have folks engage in the conversation, or feel free to put a question in the chat. While we're waiting, I did have one question on the feedback loops. That's just such a really insightful and strategic approach for determining how to really find ways to speak to different users, depending on where they're coming from, whether they're hearing about cybersecurity for the first time, whether they're really technical and they understand it very well, whether they're more on the business side and they know cybersecurity is important, but they're just getting up to speed on all of these new threats that have kind of emerged in the pandemic. What are you seeing in the general cybersecurity sector that is really, people are, when they see these communications, they're getting their hands on it and they're running with it. They're taking it and they're going to their boss and saying, hey, we need to think about this. Or you see maybe CEOs of organizations saying, hey, folks might be taking our IP. They could potentially be trying to infiltrate our financial systems. What should we do to stop this? What are you kind of seeing in those different areas? And what could maybe the audience take away with going back to their agencies and building different approaches out there?
That's a good question. I think two things immediately come to mind that have really resonated, or I would consider trends. The first one is network defenders really value when you can help them contextualize and prioritize their efforts. Because again, there's vulnerabilities and software patches being released all the time. And so how do you really distill what's important and what you need to act on now? So we've released lists of, hey, here's the top 25 vulnerabilities Chinese actors are using. Here's the top 10 vulnerabilities Russian foreign intelligence services are using. And we've received a lot of feedback from the community that says this is really helpful. CISA has their catalog of known exploited vulnerabilities, that type of thing. The second thing I've kind of seen and heard is that just across the community writ large, there is this new awareness and appreciation for cybersecurity. I think there are people that have been in this field for a very long time, just working tirelessly, not getting the resources or the investments that they need, and that's really starting to change. So I think that even though there's an urgency and we're all a little bit tired, there's new momentum and fresh energy as well, and that's something that we're definitely hearing writ large. I see there's, sorry, I'm moderating myself.
Oh, fantastic. Yes, go ahead.
I saw the question from Erica about feedback loops. That's a good question. We use a couple different methods. So we have internal government to government channels that we can share our guidance via, and we hear back from our customers there frequently, who are across the entire US government. But also when we release guidance on Twitter and on nsa.gov, we include email addresses, contact information, send us your feedback. And we do have people write in and share their feedback that way. So that's two methods, and I'll touch on two more briefly. I work in the NSA Cybersecurity Collaboration Center, which is how we partner with feedback on shared cybersecurity issues with a real focus on protecting the US defense industrial base. And so we'll hear from our industry partners. You know, we have already established communications channels with these folks, and we'll hear back from them that way on advisories. And then the final thing is working with our fabulous partners in public affairs to do sentiment analysis on media, social media trends, et cetera. All of that feeds into a report that we can then share with our technical analysts and say, hey, you know, here's feedback, and then they'll iterate and improve. One example of this is during COVID, we released guidance on how to securely use collaboration capabilities because we saw more and more people in the government rapidly going to telework using things like Zoom or Teams, WebEx, whatever, you know, your platform of choice may be. And so we pushed out guidance that said, hey, here's how you can configure these securely. Here's some things that you should think about when you're using these platforms for official business. And we received a ton of feedback from all over the community saying this was hugely helpful. Can you consider evaluating these platforms as well? And so we actually released 3 or 4 iterations of that guidance, which you can find on Twitter and nsa.gov. My favorite site, our favorite site for memes, I would just say we all have very carefully curated Twitter feeds. The InfoSec community is amazing and funny, and they constantly keep us laughing on Twitter.
Thank you so much, Bailey. And so with that, we will move to the next presentation. And thank you for giving us insight into how we can take these cyber threats and run with them and make our adversaries have hard days every day. So on to the next presenter. I will now introduce Jim Mclaughlin with the Department of Treasury. We're very excited to have Jim here today. Jim is the Director of Emergency and Security Programs Division at the Bureau of the Fiscal Service at the Department of Treasury. Jim started at Treasury's Bureau of the Public Debt, conducting PC support and statistical-based forecast modeling. Jim worked on the introduction of I-bonds and the design of the Treasury Direct System, where the first electronic I-bonds were sold over the internet. Jim was the Chief Information Security Officer at Public Debt for several years before it was consolidated with another bureau to create the Fiscal Service. He has presented on numerous security topics at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, the Federal Information System Security Educators Association, RSA conferences, and elsewhere. Jim now focuses on overseeing resiliency, pandemic monitoring, insider threat, classified information handling, and security investigations work at the Fiscal Service. Jim is a violinist and a concert master of his high school orchestra, played in his college orchestra as an elective, and is also in community orchestras participated in community orchestras after college. Jim taught violin lessons to young children for several years using the Suzuki method. Jim graduated from Marietta College with a Bachelor of Science in Petroleum Engineering and has worked on oil rigs in the Gulf of Mexico. During the pandemic, Jim adopted a starving, terrified stray cat that showed up on his deck early in the pandemic, and because of the pandemic was unable to get her spayed before she became pregnant. Jim now has 5 cats demanding his attention in his spare time, so we may offer names for the cats to Jim in the Q&A following the presentation, but Jim, I will now hand the mic to you.
All right, thanks, Jackie. Could you go ahead and move on to the title slide? Thank you. First of all, thank you all for allowing me time to speak here. Hopefully I'll be able to share some information of things we've done at Fiscal Service that'll be of some benefit to you in your endeavors. First, let me give you a little bit of background about what Fiscal Service does in case there's anybody that doesn't know about our little bureau within Treasury. Fiscal, you can think of it as the agency that keeps the government's checkbook. We bring money in and we send money out. We make payments to many millions of people and corporations. We do things like the monthly payment that so many seniors are looking for each month and counting on getting. We also borrow the money to finance the government for all the money that we're spending that we don't bring in through other means such as tax collections. And another thing that Fiscal does to do that is through things that you're probably familiar with, like the T-bills. We conduct the Treasury auctions that bring in hundreds of billions of dollars in one particular moment. Those systems are extremely sensitive. We also, in the intro was mentioned the I-bonds. Some of you may have recently purchased those. It's been really popular recently since they're now paying 9% interest, 9.62. And that's through our Treasury Direct online internet system. So that's a little bit about Fiscal in case you didn't know what we did. We also are a shared service provider in areas such as HR, administrative services, accounting, and authentication services. Next slide, please. But what I'm going to be talking to you about today is where we used HCD-CX focused approach in something we did in our security area. Right now, very similar to the first talk we heard, moving things into clouds. Fiscal is doing that as well, and we're trying to do it as fast as we can. One of the things we're trying to do is create reusable, standardized, simple patterns that are going to be deployed as code for the underlying security architecture. The resiliency patterns that we're needing to design for that is what I'm going to be talking to you about today, so that we make sure that as we put things in the cloud, they are resilient to the level that is needed for the support, the business area work that we're doing, whether it's sending out payments, borrowing money, or performing HR services for another government agency. As we started down this path of coming up with the cloud resiliency patterns, we first looked at who are our customers, who are we trying to do this for, and we narrowed it down to 2 primary customer areas: the business areas that do all that work that Fiscal Service does for the government, and the IT staff who are supporting, building, and running those systems that help them accomplish that work. So our main objectives here were to keep things simple. We are heavily involved in continuous process improvement. We do Kaizen exercises within our different areas, focusing on how do we make what we're doing better, faster, cheaper. what type of resiliency needs do we need to be meeting here in order to have these patterns. We wanted to make sure that we got it right the first time in every build, and it didn't have to be keep reinventing the wheel. And ultimately, we want to get things into the cloud quickly and right. So we wanted to make sure for our business areas that we had an easy to understand menu of selections so that they would know what they needed to ask for as we move things into the cloud for their resiliency needs. And for the IT staff, those cloud administrators and operators and the system designers, we were focusing in on, okay, so what type of standard offerings can we have? We want to keep this simple so that they don't have to keep reinventing that wheel, so that things can be deployed as code, and we will be able to repeat that in a rapid implementation as we migrate into clouds. Ultimately, the bottom line is we wanted to be able to design few of these cloud resiliencies patterns, these tiers for cloud resiliency, and then build them many times without having to customize each and every one from ground zero. Next slide, please. So as we went about doing that, trying to keep things in a customer-friendly focus, we decided that we didn't want to roll out these resiliency tiers after we got them built and try to explain to people how do you figure out which type of tier you need by having them fill out a long, complicated 50-question form that was multiple pages, or looking at a security policy that goes on for ever and ever using technical jargon that people are tuning out. So we kept coming back to, okay, so what is it that is going to drive what determines how we build these resiliency tiers? And we focused it down, kept cutting it down, whittled it down until we got to two key questions that we could communicate easily to the business areas. How long can you be down? And how much data can you afford to lose? And then we focused it in on, we decided that we were going to build 4 standardized tiers for resiliency. And we focused in on, okay, so can your system be down 1 hour? Or is it more something that if it's down for a week, it really doesn't matter that much? Huge difference in how we're going to build the resiliency into that DevSecOps model as we're building things and making our standard architecture patterns for these resiliency tiers. Similarly, if you lose 5 minutes of data, is the world going to come to end, or congressional hearings going to impose? Or is your system and your data something that if we lose a week of it, you can rebuild it over time and it really doesn't matter that much? Nobody's going to be yelling and screaming, the world's not coming to an end. Next slide, please. So after we had narrowed down and figured out, okay, we're going to build 4 resiliency tiers for our cloud platforms. We're going to have these standard offerings. It's going to be built in reusable code. How do we communicate not only to the business people, but to the IT people so that they understand which tier is which and they can keep them straight? Initially, we were thinking, okay, well, yeah, there's 4 tiers, just name them 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then we started talking to people and realized that that's not something that's intuitively understandable. Some people were going to look at 1, 2, 3, 4 and think, okay, the best, most resilient tier and the thing that's probably going to cost me the most money is number 1. Other people were going to look at it completely backwards from that and think that the best is going to be number 4. Just based on common experience, like if you're in the Olympics and you place 4th, you're not going to be on the podium. You want to be first to get that best medal. If you're thinking about things in terms of like a grade point average, if you're bringing home a report card that has 4.0, everybody's going to be proud of you. You're going to be real happy. If, however, you bring a 1.0 grade point average home, you've got serious problems and you probably need significant tutoring. So we decided, okay, numbers are not going to cut it. How can we come up with something that everybody recognizes? And what we settled on was metals: copper, silver, gold, and platinum. As we did some testing on these using just people on the team and outside the team, different customers, everybody understood that copper would probably not cost as much as silver, that gold would be even more expensive, and platinum was going to be your most costly. And yeah, that makes sense, that platinum is going to be your most resilient, copper is going to be the least resilient. Next slide, please. So then after we settled on the different names for these tiers that we came up with, we started thinking about how can we keep this simple and communicate to our two main customer bases of business area and our IT staff. And we started thinking about how do people consume information. The previous speaker got into this a little bit, so I won't have to go into much details on. Some people like to read and others don't. Some people are very graphic in how they want to see things. They want to see the pictures. Other people want to read a whole bunch of details. They like reading the great American novel. Others say, I don't have time. I need to be able to glance at something without having to read a bunch of technical speak jargon. I don't want to see that. Just give me a picture, show me a graphic. So we decided that we would do one-pagers, as we called them. We want a one-page summary that makes it easier for people to see what resiliency guide they need so that they can understand it quickly. They're not going to have to read 100 pages of security policy and security standard narrative documents. But those who prefer narrative, they're going to have a one page and it's going to have a lot of words on it. Those who don't are going to get the same information on a different page, and the people who want to look at both can. Next slide. So here's an example of what we came up with for the people who prefer to read. So this has a lot of words on it. To try to simplify it and make it easier and faster for them to understand, we focused in on those two key questions I mentioned earlier. How long can you be down? And how much data loss can you sustain? So we put those into table format and then are guiding them through based on their answers to those questions. Where do you fall in these charts? And they'll be able to figure out, yeah, okay, I can be down for about 5 hours. So, okay, I'm between the 4 and the 24. And then they can look and see, well, if I lose more than 5 minutes worth of data, yeah, people's not going to be happy. It's going to be on the national news. So then we can have the conversation with them about what resiliency tier is most appropriate for them based on the risk appetite for their particular applications. And we threw in some extra information there on the side in the bullets, things like how far apart, if they have multi-region cloud implementation, those regions have to be. We set that at 200 miles. If you have such critical data that it needs to survive electromagnetic pulses, yeah, that's going to have to be in shielded data centers. And some other information there explaining to people what our hot, warm, cold definitions are. Next slide, please. So this is what we came up with for the people who are more graphic oriented and don't want to read that great American novel, just want to be able to glance at it in a few seconds, understand what it means for the different resiliency tiers. So we did things in the swim lanes here in columns for the 4 different tiers of copper, silver, gold. We put the dollar signs up there that everybody understands. Okay, so $2 is more than 1, 3 for the gold, 4 for the platinum. But the main thing we focused in and spent a lot of time actually in discussions with different groups of people trying to make sure that this made sense and that people could be able to figure it out just by looking at the picture. And we had somebody on staff, luckily, who had graphic design experience and expertise that put this together. So here in the copper column, we've got one cloud. It's one color. We have one little application window and one little stack of drives there for the backup. So this is representing, we've got things in a single cloud, single instance, and one offline backup. You could probably, most people were able to figure out pretty much that understanding without the words, but with the words and the picture, they grasped it really quickly. Similarly, on the silver column, we've got one cloud again. We're running in multiple availability zones in this instance. So we've got the application running over on the East Coast, but it looks like we've got more than one of them. Then when we go to our backups, hey, they're two different colors. Oh, I see different colored text at the bottom. Okay, one's active geo-redundant backup and the other is an offline. Oh, and it looks like they're in different parts of the country from where you're running the thing, and they're separated from each other as well. So those are in different regions. Then you look at the gold picture, what's different here? Okay, we've still got multiple instances of the application. Oh, but two of them are on the East Coast and one of them's out on the West Coast. So this is going to be more resilient. So if you have a huge earthquake in one region of the country or some other kind of cataclysmic disaster, it keeps on going. We also have two backups here, but wait a minute. One of them's in a different
Jim?
Yes.
In the interest of time, we have other speakers. We'd appreciate it if we could wrap this one up. Thank you.
That's just what I was going to do, Neil. And the next one, we move on to 3 clouds. So you've got the different colors. And that was it. If anybody has questions in the interest of time, if we need to keep on flying, you've got my contact information in the slides. Just shoot me an email.
Thank you so much, Jim. We do have one question, so I'm going to send that over. I just want to let the individual who sent it know we did receive it. And so, Arfa, I will pass it to you to introduce Amanda and Tara.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Jim and Jackie as well. Our next speakers, we've got Amanda Damewood. She is Acting Director of User Experience for the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, a leader with a long history of designing and improving programs, processes, services, specializing in helping organizations establish design programs and develop their maturity. Last year, she took on a new challenge as Acting Director of US Experience at USCIS. She's also been a designer for Code for America and offers HCD coaching and workshops. Then we've also got Tara Webster, who is a data and business analyst with the Data and Business Intelligence DBIS team at USCIS. She actually began her career there as an adjudications officer and brings deep knowledge of the agency's business processes, which continue to drive her work understanding of users' needs. Tara lives in Vermont with her family and enjoys hiking, reading. She's also clarinet player in a concert band. So welcome, Amanda and Tara. We're so excited to have you and hear from you today. Over to you, ladies.
Thanks so much, Arfa. I'll kick things off. Arfa already did a fantastic introduction, but I'm Amanda Damewood. I am a white woman with shoulder-length hair wearing a yellow sweater and a patterned top. And I'm joined by Tara. And I'm going to just go through our first few slides here. So next slide, please. So just a little bit about our operating context. We have domestic facilities in every single one of the 50 US states, as well as Puerto Rico, the Mariana Islands, and many places overseas as well, where we work to help process folks' applications for immigration benefits. Next slide, please. And so I'm the Acting Director of User Experience for the Office of Information Technology. And we do have other places where we have folks doing service design in our organization for folks that are aware of the difference there. But inside of the Office of Information Technology, we have almost 80 UX staff. And those are divided between a small amount of federal staff, and most of those are contract staff. And so my work is helping managers of design teams and helping ITPMs understand how to work with the UX process. We have about 70% of our tools are internal facing, 30% are external facing, and a small amount, 1% or so, are fed to fed. So there's plenty of work to go around. Next slide, please. And one of the things that I learned early on in working at more of a leadership level was how fantastic our DBIS team, or database and business intelligence, is at working with their users. And that's really important, because if I think I have a lot on my plate, they have a ton on their plate. The data is all here, and you can imagine what it's like to manage all that. The team's not that big. I want to say something like a team of 20 or so. Next slide, please. And it's really important to do this work because supporting core capabilities with our mission. So for instance, with these 4 data visualization and sharing tools, Tableau, Smart, SAS, and Databricks, we're making operational decisions that can help us decide how to staff things, what forms to digitize next, and all sorts of other mission critical activities. So it's really important that we have good data. It's important that we have safe data. And it's important that we have the systems in place to make sure that our users know what to do with these tools and are data literate so that they're satisfied with the tools that we're able to offer them. Next slide, please. And so I just want to kind of dig into that, because I think that when you talk about data literacy, or when you talk about sort of managing expectations and that kind of thing, it doesn't necessarily sound like there's a direct tie into cybersecurity, but I really think there is. And so for instance, with our Databricks tool, we have these 3 layers of Databricks security and governance: access control, our credentials pass through, and then secrets management. And by having 3 things there, it gives us a lot of layers to make sure that we're not having something really simple, someone logging in and using something that they shouldn't be using through logging in. And we can make sure that our access is really secure, which leaves us open for things like shoulder surfing, or someone printing something out and leaving it somewhere they shouldn't, and all of those kinds of saving it to other systems, saving it in an Excel spreadsheet, or emailing it back and forth. And that's where you can really open the door to some vulnerabilities. So it's not necessarily what we might think of most directly when we think of cybersecurity, but it definitely has to do with the security of our mission. So next slide, please. When we think of more traditional cybersecurity, we probably think about things like our Databricks management API. And it's really important to us to minimize the number of connections that we have system to system. We've had a long history of working things through spreadsheets, of emailing things back and forth, but over the last several years, we've done a lot of work to bring things into a data lake, and to consolidate our ability to connect system to system, moving to the Apogee platform, and all sorts of other ways that we've been able to make things more secure just by managing those connections and making sure that our systems are doing work that used to be manual for folks. So with our Databricks specifically, we can create and delete and manage clusters and get execution status, which makes things work really smoothly and help us do a good job of supporting folks with questions when things aren't working as they expect. We have an easy upload of any third-party libraries and managing our encrypted scopes and credentials so that we can make sure that things are really secure that way as well. It's really easy to manage because we have Git and Jenkins on the scene as well. And then finally, we have our machine learning flow tracking API for our data science experiments that we do as well. And so what this all means is we're really focused on creating an excellent user experience for folks that are using Databricks or using the tools that rely on Databricks, because it's our opinion that, and our experience, which is what Tara's going to talk about in a minute, that when you create great user experiences for folks, then they use the systems as intended. And I know that someone brought this up earlier, but we wanted to provide a really concrete kind of case study about what happens when either things aren't working as expected, or when the system isn't quite ready for us to be able to support the full user need. And so one of the things that the Deepest team has done is identified the need for a role like Tara's to really make sure, I think in other places you might hear about customer success, and that's certainly sort of similar to what Tara does, but we've called it Tara's white glove service. So I'm going to ask you to move to the next slide. And just to highlight one more thing, we have Databricks data sharing in 4 different ways, and this is why it's really critical. This Databricks data sharing is from system to system, so case management system to scheduling system, for instance, or something like that. We also intake external system data into our systems so that it can propagate through our various internal tools. We can also take our internal data and safely share it with other federal partners, law enforcement, Department of State, et cetera. And then finally, we also use it for our own reporting. So you can imagine the number of different folks that rely on being able to use the Databricks tool for their everyday needs, day in, day out, all hours of the night and day. And that's why it's really important for us to support this wide variety of users. Next slide, please. And so, like I said before, it's more secure than email. We don't have anybody sending something over to somebody and then emailing a few minutes later with a password or anything like that. It's more efficient. People can hit things and it's just there. It's more trustworthy. No one has to say, you know, is this data up to date? Is this data out of date? They know that it's there, and so it's the right data for them. Ultimately, it's better for all of our customers. It's better for our internal customers, our external customers. It's better for leadership. It's better for people that are just, you know, down in the trenches doing that work. So it's really important to us to share, and that's why it's really important for us to share securely. Next slide, please. And so that's why we have Tara in her role. And so I'm going to hand it over to Tara to talk about that a little bit.
Hi, thanks, Amanda. Yeah, like back at the beginning of back at the beginning, we mentioned we had a slide on how many data sources we have, and it was up to like 92, I think, every day. It seems like we're adding more. So a ton of different data sources, relationships between the data, 4 different tools. And so like, I like how Amanda said, we don't, in terms of a classic cybersecurity, like we're looking at it a little differently in terms of if you don't use your data properly, it's a security issue to our business. So in that sense, yeah, that's why I guess my role was sort of created, was to help users navigate all of that data and all of those tools, because we'll have you know, a management, we get requests from, you know, Congress to just your supervisor asking any range of business questions. You know, how many of this is there? How many of this did we produce? You know, to security threats. So there's, you know, in a global event, we now need to search our database for such and such a thing to support, you know, secure some sort of mission. So these questions will come really quickly to an analyst, and, you know, we serve, like on this slide, we serve immigration service analysts through the entry level to mid-level to advanced people. So, you know, you get hit with a question and you're like, how do I do this? You know, whatever. So that's where my position was created, was to, I guess I'm like this, I think we skipped this slide. I'm like a second tier level to help with advanced questions and to help users get through all of those data sets and all of our tools. That's kind of, we have a first level tier. We have a center of excellence that has a
that's the next slide, actually,
and videos, and it does training. I was going to say I'm a little bit backwards. Should we do that? Yeah, this is it. Yeah. Okay. So before me, we have the Center of Excellence tier as a tier 1 support. Yeah, with analytics, tool training, other training requests, videos, documentation, data dictionaries, and they do ticket tracking for problems and other general support. Yeah. And then, so when users, once they get used to, you know, used to our tools, and then they're good on their own, but when they get hit with something they don't know, or they just need help with our systems, that's what I'm here for. So I help them navigate all of those databases. Here's how you join the data. You know, help them with logic support. Let me see. What's our next? Can we go to the next slide? Yeah. So, right, I help with data literacy. I help them like explain the tools to them. This is where my like knowledge, having been an adjudicator, helps, because I understand the questions they're being asked, and I've worked, you know, for decades with this data. So, yeah. And then one of the ways that I try to work with people, I found it helps when they want something. I'll ask them to mock me up. I'm like, give me exactly what you want. You know, here's an Excel. If it's an Excel report, give me the columns. I'll take that and actually build it with real data. And I found that really helped users, you know, think through their problem. A lot of times they haven't really thought through it. So it's almost like a website wireframe approach. So I've used that. That helps a lot too. All right, can we go to the next slide? Yeah, okay. And so sometimes I can help them directly, either with logic or, you know, with creating what they need for them. Other times, what they're looking for is more than just business logic. It's actually an application, or it's, you know, some sort of process. And so, yeah, I guess that's what we call a warm handoff. So I'll be the bridge between the user, and I'll find the right person or group in our IT section, match them up, explain each other to the IT staff and the IT technology information to the business people. So it's really kind of that in between role of just helping users and IT get the job done. The liaison role is really important. It's a very like human-centered approach, because there's nothing better than when you have a question, having somebody that will just talk to you and help you. I don't have, dial 1 for this, dial 2 for that. You can just come directly and help people directly get questions answered, introduce them to other people. In a tech world, there's nothing better than a knowledgeable, friendly person, I find. Anyway, okay, what's our, can we go to the next one? Yeah, oh, right. A lot of times we have trouble with our data, obviously with that many data sets. Stuff doesn't, a lot of deep dive and troubleshooting, figuring out what the problem is, getting it straightened out, getting IT to fix it, and then keeping the users in the loop, which is often the part that falls down. Users will report something and they never hear anything again. Meanwhile, IT does fix it, and IT is all happy, hey, we fixed it. And the users are out there saying, IT doesn't care, we don't know, blah, blah, blah. So closing that loop, I find, has really helped build good bridges between our user community and our IT community. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah, keep the customers happy. That's my name. Yeah, the more the tools work is designed, the fewer workarounds. We've had a lot of trouble with workarounds, and we've been working, but IT's approach was to take away some of the tools that users would do to do workarounds. And that's probably part of the process, part of the solution. But the other part to me is understanding, helping them do what they need. They need what they need to do. Just taking away their tools is just going to make them mad. So how do we really get to the bottom of the problem? So like that, I've worked on that a bit. And yeah, more customer-oriented solutions lead to higher adoption and lower barriers to success. So
yeah, thanks, Tara.
Thank you.
So Tara's also been really instrumental in closing that feedback loop with support. One of the things that we look for as far as human-centered design maturity is when we hear from customers or users that they're having a particular problem, that we're trying to take a page from Agile maturity and like make sure that that goes in the team's roadmap, so that the teams don't just lose that feedback. And there might be more research that we need to do before we can decide how to triage that problem. But we also want to make sure that if people are telling us something's broken, that we are working with them to fix it, whether that's, fixing something in this tool or even embarking on some citizen development or something like that. So thanks everyone for having us. My information's on here, and I can certainly help connect anybody that wants to connect with Tara. I guess there's an oversight there, but thanks so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amanda and Tara. Over to you, Neil.
Well, thank you so much, everybody. Next slide, please. So next slide after this, what I'd like to say is, first of all, thank you so much to all our speakers today. I apologize, we have a shy audience here and you didn't get too many questions, but if we do get any questions via sidebar, we'll be more than happy to send them your way to get some answers back. But Ida, thank you so much. Michael, Bailey, Jim, Amanda, Tara, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to all of us. It was amazing. And we hope to see you again if you, if we were hospitable enough and you are gracious enough. So thank you so much. I can't say that enough. Next slide, please. And now here, this is the interesting part, where this is the ET-COI, but we had the cyber, COI. It was a joint event with us. And, so thank you so much to Stephen, Ken, Patrick, Darren, Theo, Doug, and most of all, Arfa from the Cyber COI for joining us today and helping put together just this wonderful program. And so thank you so much. And with that, I will turn it back over to my very competent co-hosts, Arfa and Jackie and Nancy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Neil. We know we are at time, so for folks who need to drop, we will be sending out a recording of the video. So we'll make sure you have this information. For folks who can stay on, we are going to walk through the working group updates for the Emerging Technology COI. And so for those who do not know, the Emerging Technology COI has seven or eight working groups. You can see them here. And so we're very excited to share the just phenomenal work each of these teams are doing for the COI today. Some of our leads may have dropped, but I am going to see if we can have folks jump in for the various working groups. And I'll start with artificial intelligence. Do we have Nevin, Josh, Mike, or Sandy on the line?
Well, this is Sandy. I'm here. I'll just quickly say that this has been a very strong and recurring group that meets on Fridays. It's now residing at the Veterans Affairs with the Consumer Product Safety Commission CTO as one of the co-chairs of the working group, and the Veterans Affairs hosting it through Josh Hakakian. And it's a very dynamic group. It's working on, it constantly produces papers that are consumed and not becoming shelfware. It would be fantastic for this group to work more closely with the cyber group based on the presentations received today. And even with USCIS, there was a lot that was in the presentation there that would, I think, work very well with this group. So if anybody wants to reach out, Jackie has all the email addresses there for, you have it for Nevin and for Mike, not for Josh, but we can get that to Josh and get your invitations. You can see on the bottom with coordination my email, so feel free to send anything. Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you, Sandy. And now we will move to our blockchain working group. I believe Fred had to drop, and so I'll just provide a quick overview. In conjunction with the AI working group, the blockchain working group is a really robust, great group of individuals who meet on a weekly basis at, I believe, 10 a.m. And so, and so they are working through a white paper they just recently completed and are moving on to their next steps. So now is a great time to join if you are interested in the blockchain group. We are also working directly with Joshua Hakakian to put together a use case symposium in September where we will highlight blockchain use cases. And so if there is a use case you would like to share with ACT-IAC and have featured at that symposium, we would be absolutely delighted to feature your organization's use case. Please let me know and we can reach out with more information. And so along with this, for more information on the blockchain working group in general, Nancy Delanoche is the director for the communities of interest at ACT-IAC and is just a great resource. So we will put her information in the chat as well, and she can provide more information on the blockchain working group. Our next working group is the DevOps working group, which is led by David Hernandez. I don't think David is on the call either. So the DevOps working group meets every other Monday at noon. They have been bringing in phenomenal speakers and are working on updating a few of their white papers. So for folks interested in DevOps, please reach out to David or Nancy. For the Intelligent Automation Working Group, this group is led by Latrice Goldsby out of USDA and Brian Jacobs with Macro Solutions. And they just recently hosted a Build-A-Bot session, which just had really great attendance. And it was great to find a forum where people can engage with emerging technologies and get their hands dirty. And so this is a really just phenomenal group in terms of the discussion and being able to see the technologies and really experience how they would work within an organization. And so for folks interested in the Intelligent Automation Working Group, please make sure to reach out to Brian Jacobs. And as mentioned, Nancy is a great resource as well. For the IoT and Smart Infrastructure Working Group, This working group meets every other Thursday at 8:30 a.m. Do we by chance have Mike, Don, or Pete on the call? Okay. So for the IoT working group, we just recently hosted a monthly meeting with them, which is online and is recorded. We'd be happy to share it with the greater ACT-IAC community. Please send us a note and we can make sure that you have the information for the IoT and Smart Infrastructure working group. This working group meets every other Thursday at 8:30 a.m. And they are just tackling some of the most challenging problems facing government today. And so it's just a very lively group with a lot to cover. And they're looking for volunteers. So if this is of interest, please reach out. Now is the time to sign up for the IoT working group. And do we by chance have Tim Gilday on the call? All right, so for the quantum knowledge of practice, this is a working group that, or knowledge practice that recently kicked off, and it's just getting off the ground. And so with Tim, he's a really fantastic resource for quantum, and it's there's a lot that's being established with the group, so this is a great time to get involved as well. If Nancy is still on the call, Nancy, was there anything you wanted to add for the quantum group? All right, so with that, those are all of the emerging technology COI working groups. They are a lot of folks, really fantastic volunteers involved. And so we'd be happy to have you join our team and to share more information on the COI itself. And so I think with that, Neil, was there anything you wanted to close out with?
No, once again, a very grateful thank you, to everybody on the team, and also a really grateful thank you to the Cyber COI for helping put this event together. Great job, between Jackie and Arfa. I mean, you guys got it. I don't even know why old guys like me are still around, so thank you so much, both of you. Have a great day.
Thank you, Neil. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.